The 177th edition of the Roy's Boys podcast starts right now.
Carolina basketball family is the strongest there's ever been. There ever will be.
Nate Humphrey King rights the ball. Pushes into Hubert Davis. 8 seconds. Davis trying to get free. Over to Fox. Fox, baseline. Up for the shot. Good. Off the glass. Oklahoma calls timeout. But the game is over. The game is over. Carolina has upset number 1 Oklahoma. Been ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered by Minnie.
With 20 seconds left to play. Goes back to Michael Jordan. Jumper from out on the left. Good! 63, 62, 13, 12, 11. Georgetown with one timeout. Brent Brown looking. Throw away to Worthy. 35. The Tar Heels are going to win the national championship. Carolina with foul. He takes the timeout. Technical foul. Technical foul.
Brown gets it into Williams. Here comes Williams front court. Williams on the drive. Gets it back out the head. Long outside shot. Short rebound. It's over. And how about the Tar Heels? They are the national champions.
The Tar Heels are the national dadgum champions.
And that's what it takes when you big time games. You got to compete. You do it with your brain, and you got to do it with your heart too. And that's pretty doggone good.
From QCBroadcasting.com, this is the Roy's Boys podcast with your host, Josh Marlowe. Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Roy's Boys podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services.
Keep talking.
It is been said to be the game that always delivers. And tonight, Duke Carolina delivered once again as Carolina invaded Cameron Indoor Stadium and walks away with a 91-87 win over the Duke Blue Devils. And, buddy,
game of the year in college basketball. Don't care what anybody says. The people that said the rivalry didn't deliver, you're a moron. You have no idea what you're talking about. That game was as good as just about any other year.
That was as much a Duke Carolina game as I can remember really since we started doing the blog, since we started the podcast. That exemplified the rivalry as much as any game out there.
Yeah, and it didn't end up with a bad result on Carolina's end, so I think that's also probably part of it.
Right.
But, that was – I mean, and maybe I just don't get or don't realize it as much in recent years because we've been in Chapel Hill for a few games, so you don't really notice the crowd noise as much. You're locked in on the game and what's going on. Tonight, that was what I was locked in on, too. And it felt like a Duke-Carolina game. I know that, Coach K said in his press conference that it just didn't have the same level of energy from the players. I didn't really see that. I thought both teams were fired up to play against each other. You had guys that hadn't played great all year on both sides that stepped up and played well in this game. I mean, it had the feel of a Carolina Duke game. Like, I just don't know how people can watch that game and not feel like that. It's still a big win. The people saying that they don't understand the storming of Franklin Street, which is a completely different topic, but that they don't understand it because this was an unranked versus unranked matchup. You just don't know the rivalry, first of all. No matter what number is next to the name, if you win, if Carolina wins, you storm Franklin against them. It's how it always works. It doesn't matter. But this was a big win for Carolina, especially with what happened in the game prior, where you scored 50 points the entire game. You scored 50 points in the second half of tonight's game. You looked really, really good offensively. And look, I don't know if that's how Carolina is going to look the rest of the year. Last year against Duke, they scored 96. Granted, the game went to overtime. That was the best they'd looked offensively probably all year.
Yes.
So it doesn't always carry over. But I think there are a lot of positives that you can take away from tonight's game. And I think for the biggest thing that it does, one, it gets you a quad one win, and it gets your mind and mainly the players' minds off of what was a rough loss against Clemson. If let's say these games that were being played back, Saturday and Monday with Duke on Saturday and Miami on Monday, let's say they were flipped, I would be more concerned about Carolina's mindset in that game against Miami and that it could be a 2-game losing streak. You shake it off, you get a win now. I think this is a great reset for Carolina to get ready, as you said when you put it on social media, for a stretch that's going to be really tough.
Yeah. The rivalry brings out the best in coaches, players, fans alike. It brought out the best in both of those teams tonight. That's the best Carolina's looked on the offensive end of the court, and you could probably say the same thing for Duke. That was a well-played, that was a well-officiated ball game. And it came down to the final minutes, as it always does. And as we've seen Carolina, who's now won 7 of their last 9 games, they're comfortable having to make the plays you got to make to win games. And they made them tonight in the biggest game that a lot of these guys have ever played in. And it's just, I know Duke isn't ranked. I know it wasn't a packed Cameron. It's a really big win for this Tar Heel team. And I've said that at different times this year. Whether it was the win over Kentucky, whether it was when you won those 2 games at home against NC State and Wake Forest. This is a really big win for this Carolina team. And I told you, we're hanging out, watching what's turned out to be a great slate of college basketball on this Saturday, which is no mistake that it happens on the first Carolina-Duke game of the year. You get a great weekend of college basketball.
That's always how it works. We always, whenever we go to the game, like whenever we go to Franklin Street to watch the games, usually at Sup Dogs, it's always like this phenomenal slate, great finishes, and we don't get to see a whole lot of it. But this year was a little bit different. I mean, look, I wish we could have been there and everything like that, but I mean, still.
But I told you at about we got back from our, as I'll call it, our pregame meal. I told you if Carolina's going to win this game, Caleb Love's going to have to play at a really high level. And I said that when we previewed the game that, and look, Carolina won tonight in a large part because Armando Bacot, Garrison Brooks, and Day'Ron Sharp were too much for Duke. But I told you guys, previewing this game, Carolina's guards are going to have to make plays. And look, while their guards made plays, Caleb Love was phenomenal tonight. 25 points, 7 assists. Roy Williams busted his chop for his 5 turnovers because that's what he's got to do as his head coach. Caleb Love was the best player on the floor tonight.
And he needed to be. Remember what the biggest problem in both games was last year in this matchup. It was that you didn't win the point guard battle despite having what most people believe to be the better, more talented point guard. Tonight you won it. And look at the difference. Not only did you win it, Caleb Love was maybe the best player on the entire floor. That's something that we've been waiting for a while. You could see that there was a lot more confidence from him, and this is what you want to see going forward. How can you build off of this? Because we're going to need this Caleb Love if they're going to beat Virginia. It's just that simple. If you're going to beat Virginia Tech, you probably will still need this Caleb Love because they're probably going to eventually get their stuff back together. That team's not just going to completely fall apart. Those are the teams that lie ahead. And remember, you still got another game against Duke. So he's got to sort of build on this performance and continue to play this way down the stretch of the season. But I think with what he's shown, and I mean, look, nobody played well against Clemson. But I think for the most part, you look at Caleb Love, and he has consistently shown growth throughout the season. We've been really, really hard on him.
Yes.
Mainly you.
I have been.
And, that's just to bring you down from your thing about Caleb Love having to play good. I think you're going to get T-shirts printed with that, with your quote on it. But, I mean, that was the thing that we just never got to see last year with Cole Anthony because he got injured. We're seeing it with Caleb Love, and you can see the difference. And you see it's very similar to the growth patterns of guys like Marcus Page, guys like Joel Berry. I don't know if he's going to be here for as long as those guys were. Maybe not. Maybe he's a 2-year player. Maybe he's a 3-year player. I think he's got to stay. But you're seeing the growth that you want, especially from a guy that he's been forced into a bigger role than those other 2 guys that I mentioned.
Well, I think the biggest thing for him tonight, and Jay Billis, who does a great job calling this game, mentioned it in the broadcast, was that he was aggressive, but he was aggressive attacking the basket. And that was big because the man was 4 or 5 from three-point land. Had he gotten comfortable and stood out behind the perimeter and kept chucking threes, at the rate he was making them, you couldn't really have complained. But he's at his best in the open floor, putting his head down, getting inside the painted area.
What opened that up? Driving the basket.
Yeah.
That's what opened those bigger shots up.
He tonight looked like a Carolina point guard is supposed to look that plays for Roy Williams. He was a big reason why they scored 27 fast break points, which is the most this season. And he was
I think it was 29 by the end. That's the most that Duke's given up in 15 years.
Yeah, it was the most aggressive he has played this year. And I think that's what you got to love is that on the biggest stage in the biggest game he's played in all year long, he rose to the occasion. Mm-hmm. The moment wasn't too big for him, and he played a really great game.
And he did it when his backcourt mate, R.J. Davis, did not play well tonight.
Right. So he got a lot of help with Kerwin Walton, who gave you 12 points and was 4 of 4 from three-point land, but was only on the floor for 23 minutes, not because of foul trouble, simply because his defensive liabilities were exploited tonight, and he couldn't be on the court. Right. So I think that's something that, for Caleb Love, Roy Williams put the ball in your hands, and in the final 4 minutes, you were the one making the plays, making the decisions that you had to win the game. And for an 19-year-old kid to do that in that building, I can't imagine the confidence that's going to come from making those kind of plays to help your team get what is, and all, even though it's not a typical Duke team, the biggest win of the season.
That's a quad 1 win. Right. I don't think people understand that.
And it's only their second of the year.
They said that on the broadcast, that Duke has a quad 1 win against Notre Dame because it was a road game. Notre Dame is a worse basketball team than Duke. So with this being on the road, this is a quad 1 win. This is huge. This is a resume builder, believe it or not. But yeah, I think that's, there's so many different things in this game that you saw. Kerwin Walton, again, looked good on the offensive end, like you said. And we said it I think it was a couple of podcasts ago. We know what he's going to have to improve on. They're going to improve that in the offseason. Right now, there's not much that you can do about it. He's doing the best that he can out there, but there's times where he's just lost. But you saw, you look at Leaky Black, had probably his best game since, I'm blanking on the game that he shot really, really
Miami.
Well. Miami, that was it. I knew it was either that or Syracuse. So, you see him step up and play well. Garrison Brooks early on in the game comes out, sort of gets you going in what was an important stretch early on in the game because, you got to think, if you don't have that great start to the game, you're probably trailing at halftime. So that was an important start for you. And those are the things that start to add up. Armando Bacot struggling at certain points in the game, but when you need him to make big baskets, he does. Same thing with Day'Ron Sharpe, was getting outworked a little bit early on, steps up and performs well. Those are the things that you needed to see from Carolina. And it's amazing. This is a team that shot absolutely horrible from the foul line once again, but they did enough things to be able to cover that up. And that's the first time that we can say that probably since 2018-19.
Right. The thing, and I'll start with Leaky Black. Carolina doesn't win tonight without him. Mm-hmm. He gave you 12 points. He was 4 of 4 from the foul line, or 4 of 4 from the field, 3 of 4 from the foul line. He made 3 of the final 4 free throws to close the win out. But it was just his presence on the floor. Carolina was +8 with him on the court in the first half, but he was on the court for less than 6 minutes because of 3 first-half fouls. And so if you guys listen to the preview I had back when I had Brendan Marks on, he mentioned how Leaky Black was going to play a factor in this game. And this rivalry someone's got to step up and they've got to make plays. And tonight you got it in Caleb Love and you got it in Leaky Black. It's a really good thing that it was just you and I watching this game tonight, because if people would have heard the amount of slurs that were hurled at Armando Bacot, Garrison Brooks, and Dayron Sharp's games tonight, you wouldn't have thought that all three guys scored double figures.
When we say that, by the way, we do mean, we need to clarify this.